the Pentagon is in a bit of a mess with the guy who's running the whole entire place. Yet Pete Hegseth is firing back at his entire team that may be trying to take him down. This is fascinating because it's effectively like the neocons at work, right? You have a whole system that is not designed to like somebody, like a newcomer like Pete Hegseth coming in there. And they've been leaking, and he's been getting sort of tarred and feathered, if you would, for this whole Signal Gate thing, saying, oh, it's Pete's fault because Pete sent the sensitive information. He disputes that, argues that it wasn't that sensitive. It wasn't classified information. Well, now a new thing came out over the weekend, and of course it went straight to the New York Times, alleging that Pete Hegseth shared attack details in a second Signal chat with his wife and his brother. Now, his wife is a former Fox News producer. I used to work with Pete. I worked with her. I know them well. She's kind of like the producer, right? In the relationship, I think his wife is very, very involved in what he does. We know that, right? Because the New York Times also reported that when he was meeting with foreign leaders, she was there as well. So that's sort of a given. Whether or not he should have been communicating on Signal, don't forget, we can go back to what we learned before, everyone. And what did we learn? We learned that this was the Biden White House method of communication. We learned that the people that were in charge of the CIA under Joe Biden passed this along, this Signal communication app, to the team that was coming in for Trump and said, have at it, you can trust this, et cetera, et cetera. So whether or not you want to argue, maybe he shouldn't have been sharing information with his wife over this app, et cetera, why is it that Biden's team was like, here you go, this is great? I mean, Pete is sort of new to the intelligence circle, new, of course, to the military. Well, he had a background in the military, but new as, Pentagon chief, right? He was a reporter last time I checked. And they're like, yeah, go ahead and use this. And there was no sort of schooling, if you would, on how to use it or what to be sensitive for. I still go back to my suspicion that somebody was trying to do all of them in originally, when it was discovered that somehow the Atlantic reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, had been added to their little chat, right? Mike Waltz is like, oh, it's my fault, I created the chat. And, Pete happened to use it. And then they're trying to take him down. I think that they're like sharks in the water, right? They smell blood. Well, Pete's not having it. Trump's not having it. I want to show you what Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, said outside at the Easter Bunny thing, the egg rolling ceremony at the White House yesterday. He's like, look, these people are all about fake news and they're all trying to take me down. And I am here ready, willing, and able to fight because this is our future. This is our kids' future. He said as he had his kids like right there.
Kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much.
Okay. So he's saying, like, these guys are all fake news. You've never trusted them to begin with. I mean, consider who they are. It got worse. Okay, so no sooner did he do that. Remember, he's calling them fake news, this, that, and the other. Do you remember who published the big 51X spook article when they decided it would be a little damage control if they could get John Brennan and the rest of them, right, to come out and say that that laptop was not fake? It was none other than Politico. You know what else we know about Politico? Politico was getting all kinds of money from USAID in the way of $10,000 a month subscriptions that amounted to millions of dollars. Interestingly enough, they really spiked up in the year 2024. I digress. I only point that out to say Politico is part of the system, okay? New York Times is part of the system, okay? So when I find articles in the New York Times or in Politico, I always have to sit back and say, okay, what's this? Just like you would anybody's bias, right? So I can say, in all fairness, when you see an article in Breitbart or when you see an article on Fox or Newsmax, hey, when you know what? I like to think I'm super, super duper fair here on this show, but you probably know my bias. And so you have to understand the bias of all these publications. In the case of Politico, they have received millions of dollars from USAID. They are not in a good position right now because, well, the USAID stuff, that is poof, gone. And all the stuff that Pete stands for is stuff that they tend to stand against. So they're the ones that published this top Pentagon spokesperson article that came out just last night, Sunday night. This is kind of a big deal, okay? So this is the guy that used to be the top spokesperson at the Pentagon, and he's now taking aim at Pete Hegseth because he said the whole place has turned into a total disaster. It's a total mess under Pete. His name, and I'll surely get this wrong, is John Oliot. He's the former Pentagon chief spokesperson, lead communications at the NSC and at the Department of Veterans Affairs in President Donald Trump's first term. He's pointed out over and over again in this piece, by the way, that he was good friends with Pete and he wanted the best for Pete, but the place is just a total mess. He says, and I quote, "It's been a month of total chaos at the Pentagon, from leaks to sensitive operational plans to mass firings. The dysfunction is now a major distraction for the president, who deserves better from his senior leadership. President Donald Trump has a strong record of holding his top officials to account. Given that, it's hard to see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth remaining in his role much longer." So that's where I just am going to pause for a second. I think Donald Trump has very much a soft spot for Pete. He knows he's been through ATLL and back in terms of this whole approval process. Nobody wanted him to have the gig. He does, on a personal level, I can tell you, he trusts Pete. And he wants people there that he can trust. Whether or not Pete can trust all the people around him, the whole system, so to speak, I think that's a fair question. And I think Pete is trying to get to the bottom of that, which is why he kept firing all those people. Edgar, good to see you back here. Thank you for your generosity. Very good to have you here on the show. So there were a series of people. Remember Dan Caldwell, we talked about this last week, as well as Darren Selnick, the Deputy Chief of Staff, and Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. In the aftermath, he writes, Defense Department officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously to reporters, claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigation ordered earlier this month. Well, we talked about that, did we not? We talked about how they're trying to root out the leakers and they're trying to get rid of the people that are problematic. And I think bottom line, Pete Hegseth doesn't trust these people, even though this guy who's so loyal, he's out in Politico, before he can even catch his breath, writing an op-ed telling everybody how awful Pete's leadership is. I mean, if I'm Pete, this was my trusted guy. Thank God he resigned, right? Thank God he's out of there, because, who needs friends when you get enemies like that? Or who needs enemies, I should say, when you get friends like that? So I'm suspecting that Pete Hegseth felt pretty strongly that he couldn't trust this inner circle, including Dan Caldwell, Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll. We do know that Dan Caldwell was actually escorted out of the building, and they're making the point here in this Political piece that was very, very deliberate. In other words, they leaked the information about Dan for a deliberate reason, to try and tarnish him on his way out the door. He does say that none of these guys were disloyal, right? So that was the allegation, that they were leaking, and so they were fired for their leaking. And he says, you know what, none of this is true. While the department did say that it was going to conduct these polygraphs, for example, as part of the probe, none of those guys were given polygraphs. So I don't know how Pete came to the conclusion that they were responsible. Somehow, some way, he did, and he felt strongly enough about it that he had to get rid of them. Of course, he probably should have gotten rid of this guy too, right? Let's just be honest here. I mean, this guy was supposed to be his number one there as his spokesperson at the Pentagon, and yet as soon as he leaves his job, which he said he didn't have to leave, he's out there firing off an op-ed to Politico. So Politico reported on Friday that Hegseth's chief of staff, Joe Casper, was leaving his role. Casper had requested the investigation into the Pentagon leaks, which reportedly included military operational plans for the Panama Canal and a pause in the collection of intelligence for Ukraine. So those things were getting leaked. Who was leaking them? In Pete's view, it may have been these individuals that were quite close to him. We don't know right now, but, he's in charge. He should be able to pick his own team. I would say that they're suggesting that there are going to be more problems, more firings to come. I would imagine, yeah. I mean, here's the reality. You know what, Donald Trump, at least for now, and we'll see what happens, but I can tell you that he personally has a soft spot for this guy. He really does like Pete. And Pete was very much an ally of his on television. Don't forget Fox and Friends on the weekends. And I think that he's willing to see him through this. I mean, we'll see if it amounts to much, much more. But here's Caroline Leavitt on Fox and Friends this morning saying, you know what? The president has Pete's back. Watch.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Wow. Okay. So she's basically saying it's the Pentagon that's the problem. It's not Pete. It's the Pentagon that's the problem. And there are people in the Pentagon that do not like the direction all of this is heading with. And as a result of that, they're leaking like you wouldn't believe and causing all of these problems. So there's a lot of fury there on behalf of Pete, on behalf of the president. You hear it in Caroline. By the way, she's very good at her job. I just got to say this is a huge improvement over KGP. I'll take Caroline any day of the week, just for clarity's sake, right? I mean, you kind of get the impression she knows what she's talking about. But reality is this. There's a lot of fury happening internally. Here is what Pete Hegseth put out. After the Democrats, how do you like this? The Democrats are saying Pete Hegseth needs to go. He responds with, your agenda. Your agenda is illegals, trans, and DEI, all of which are no longer allowed. Okay, so I think they smell blood in the water. They think that this is their opportunity to take this guy out, and so they're going to work as hard as they can at it. But I'll tell you, you know what? They're wrong on it if they think that Donald Trump is going to fold just because they're going after Pete Hegseth so viciously. I think Donald Trump, if anything, is going to be there saying, Pete, I got your back. I got your back. I would say this, whatever's going on with the leakers, they got to fix that. You can't have a Pentagon that has so much hostility to the guy that's leading it. I would hope that his trusted advisors were not the people that were leaking, but clearly, Pete believes that to be the case, and thus we're in the situation we're in right now. I mean, none of this is good. None of it's good for the markets. None of it's good for our international standing. I mean, look at the markets right now. I mean, we're down significantly on the S&P, down 3.15%. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 3%. And NASDAQ down 3 and nearly 0.5%. This is kind of alarming, guys, really alarming. And I encourage you, if you haven't done it, you got to get my research, okay? 76research.com. Go over there, check it out. Use code word dollar. Look, hopefully we can help you through these turbulent times because all three of our portfolios are weathering the storm quite decently under the circumstances. But indeed, we have a challenging time ahead, and we have a challenging time because volatility is back. That's just the name of the game. I'm looking at gold, which is skyrocketing again today. At last check, up more than 3% in one day. That's a big deal. What have I been telling you for a long time now? Look, we're an independent show. We have advertisers. The 76 Research is my own company I started, but this is one of our great advertisers. TrishLovesGold.com is where you need to go to get more information on how to get up to $15,000 in free silver from American Heart for Gold, or text Trish to 65532 1-844-495-1115. Because we look at a market sell-off like this, what you're actually seeing is one of the things that holds out best and continues to triumph in an environment like this is something like gold. We're actually up nearly 3% right now at $3,437 an ounce. My gosh! Goldman Sachs, of course, predicting $4,000 by year. And check them out. Go to TrishLovesGold.com today.